Today I'm continuing to read from The Shortness of Life by Seneca. Today's name of the essay is On Tranquility of Mind. Serenus. When I looked into myself, Seneca, some of my vices appeared clearly on the surface, so that I could lay my hand on them. Some were more hidden away in the depths. Some were not there all the time, but return at intervals. These last, I would say, are the most troublesome. They are like prowling enemies who pounce on you when occasion offers, and allow you neither to be at the ready as in war, nor at ease as in peace. However, the state I most find myself in, for why should I not admit the truth to you as to a doctor, is that I am not really free of the vices which I feared and hated, though not, on the other hand, subject to them. This puts me in a condition which is not the worst, but an extremely peevish and quarrelsome one. I am neither ill nor well. There is no need for you to say that all virtues are fragile to start with, and acquire firmness and strength with time. I know too that those which toil to make a good impression, seeking high rank, for example, and a reputation for eloquence, and whatever depends on the approvals of others, take time to mature. Both those which offer real strength and those which are tricked out in some sort of die aimed at popularity have to wait years until the passage of time gradually produces their color. But I am afraid that habit, which induces firmness in things, may drive this fault more deeply into me. Long association brings love of evil as well as good. I cannot show all at once so much as bit by bit the nature of this mental weakness, which wavers between two choices and does not incline strongly either to right or to wrong. I'll tell you what happens to me, and you can find a name for the malady. I have a tremendous love of frugality, I must admit. I don't like a couch decked out ostentatiously, or clothes brought out from a chest or given a sheen by the forceful pressure of weights and the thousand mangles, but homely and inexpensive, and not hoarded to be dunned with fuss and bother. I like food which is not prepared and watched over by the household slaves, not ordered many days in advance, nor served by a multitude of hands, but readily obtainable and easy to deal with. Nothing in it out of the way or expensive, available everywhere, not heavy on the purse, on the body, and not destined to come back by the same way it entered. I want my servant to be an ordinary, unskilled, home-born slave, my silver to be the heavy wear of my rustic father, without any hallmark, and my table to be without flashy, variegated markings, and not familiar to the whole town through its many changes of fashionable owners, but set up to be used not to distract any guest's eyes with pleasure or kindle them with envy. But when I have set up these standards, I find my mind dazzled by the fine trappings of some training school for servants, with the slaves more carefully clothed and decked with gold than if they were in a public parade, and a whole army of glittering flunkies. By a house where you even walk on precious stones, where wealth is scattered in every corner, where the roof itself its glitters, and the whole populace differentially attends the ruin of a family heritage. Need I mention pools clear to the depths which flow around the dinner and guests or banquets worthy of their surroundings? After being long given up to frugality, I have found myself surrounded by the lavish splendor of luxury echoing all about me. My vision wavers somewhat, for I can raise my mind to face it more easily than my eyes, and so I come back not a worse but a sadder man. I don't move with my head so high among my trivial possessions, and a secret gnawing doubt undermines me whether that life is superior. None of these things is changing me, but none of them fails to shake me. I decide to follow my teacher's precepts and busy myself in state affairs. I decide to achieve public office, not of course because of the purple robe and the lictor's rods, but so that I can be more ready with help for my friends and relations, for all my fellow citizens, and then for all mankind. Enthusiastically I follow Zeno, Cleanthes, Chrysippus, of whom, by the way, none entered public life, and all urged others to do so. But when something has assailed my mind which is not used to being battered, when something has happened which either is unworthy of me, a common experience in every human life, or cannot easily be dealt with, when unimportant things become time-consuming, I take refuge in leisure, and just like weary flocks of animals, I make my way more quickly home. I decide to restrict my life within its walls, saying, "Let no one rob me of a single day who is not going to make an adequate return for such a loss. Let my mind be fixed on itself, cultivate itself, have no external interest, nothing that seeks approval of another. Let it cherish the tranquility that has no part in public or private concerns. But when my mind is excited by reading a convincing account of something and spurred on by noble examples, I long to rush into the forum, to speak on behalf of one man and offer help to another, which will at least be an attempt to assist, even if it does not succeed, or to curb the pride of someone else grown arrogant by success. In my studies, I suppose it must indeed be better to keep my theme firmly in view and speak to this, while allowing the theme to suggest my words and so dictate the course of an unstudied style of speech. Where is the need, I asked, to compose something to last for ages? Why not stop trying to prevent posterity being silent about you? You are born to die, and a silent funeral is less bothersome. So if you must fill your time, write something in a simple style for your own use and not for publication. Less toil is needed if you study only for the day. Again, when my mind is lifted up by the greatness of its thoughts, it becomes ambitious for words and longs to match its higher inspiration with its language, and so produces a style that conforms to the impressiveness of the subject matter. Then it is that I forget my rule and principle of restraint, that I am carried too far aloft by a voice no longer my own. To cut the matter short, this weakness in my good intentions pursues me in every sphere. I fear that I am gradually getting worse, or which is more worrying, that I am hanging on an edge like someone always on the point of falling, and that perhaps there is more wrong than I myself can see. For we take too intimate a view of our own characteristics, and bias always affects our judgment. I imagine many people could have achieved wisdom if they had not imagined they had already achieved it, if they had not dissembled about some of their own characteristics and turned a blind eye to others. For you have no reason to suppose that we come to grief more through the flattery of others than through our own. Who has dared to tell himself the truth? Who, even when surrounded by crowds of toadying sycophants, is not his own greatest flatterer? So I am appealing to you, if you have any cure for this vacillation of mind, to consider me worthy of owing tranquility to you. I realize that these mental agitations of mine are not dangerous and won't produce a storm. To express my complaint for you in a realistic metaphor, I am harried not by a tempest, but by seasickness, whatever my ailment. Then root it out and come to the help of one who is struggling in sight of land. Seneca. Indeed, Shortness, I have long been silently asking myself to what I should compare such a mental state, and I could not find no closer analogy than the condition of those people who have got over a long and serious illness, but are still sometimes mildly affected by onsets of fever and pain, and even when free of the last symptoms are still worried and upset, and though quite better, offer their hands to doctors and needlessly complain if they feel at all hot. With these people, Shortness, it is not that their bodies are insufficiently healed, but that they are insufficiently used to health, just as even a calm sea will show some ripples, especially when it has subsided following a storm. So what you need is not those more radical remedies which we have now finished with, blocking yourself here, being angry with yourself there, threatening yourself sternly somewhere else, but the final treatment. Confidence in yourself and the belief that you are on the right path, and not led astray by the many tracks which cross yours of people who are hopelessly lost, though some are wandering not far from the true path. But what are you longing for is great and supreme and nearly divine, not to be shaken. The Greeks call this steady firmness of mind euthymia. Democritus wrote a good treatise about it, but I call it tranquility. As there is no need to imitate and reproduce the form of Greek words, the point at issue must be indicated by some term which should have the sense but not the form of the Greek name. We are therefore seeking how the mind can follow a smooth and steady course, well disposed to itself, happily regarding its own condition and with no interruption to this pleasure, but remaining in a state of peace with no ups and downs. That will be tranquility. Let us consider in general how this can be achieved. You will then extract what you like from the communal remedy. Meanwhile, the whole failing must be dragged out in the open, where everyone will recognize his own share in it. At the same time, you will realize how much less trouble you have with your self-revulsion than those people who, tied to some spacious declaration and laboring under an impressive title, are stuck with their own pretense more by shame than by desire. They are all in the same category, both those who are afflicted with fickleness, boredom, and a ceaseless change of purpose, and who always yearn for what they have left behind, and those who just yawn from apathy. There are those who toss around like insomniacs and keep changing their position until they find rest through sheer weariness. They keep altering the condition of their lives and eventually stick to that one in which they are trapped not by weariness with further change, but by old age, which is too sluggish for novelty. There are those, too, who suffer not from moral steadfastness, but from inertia, and so lack the fickleness to live as they wish, and just live as they have begun. In fact, there are innumerable characteristics of the malady, but one effect, dissatisfaction with oneself. This arises from mental instability and from fearful and unfulfilled desires. When men do not dare or do not achieve all they long for, and all they grasp at is hope, they are always unbalanced and fickle, an inevitable consequence of living in suspense. They struggle to gain their prayers by every path, and they teach and force themselves to do dishonorable and difficult things. And when their efforts are unrewarded, the fruitless disgrace tortures them, and they regret not the wickedness but the frustration of their desires. Then they are gripped by repentance for their attempt and fear of trying again, and they are undermined by the restlessness of a mind that can discover no outlet, because they can neither control nor obey their desires, by the dithering of a life that cannot see its way ahead, and by the lethargy of a soul stagnating amid its abandoned hopes. All these afflictions are worse when, through hatred of their toilsome failure, men have retreated into idleness and private studies, which are unbearable to a mind aspiring to public service, keen on activity and restless by nature, because of course it's short of inner resources. In consequence, when the pleasures have been removed from busy people derived from their actual activities, the mind cannot endure the house, the solitude, the walls, and hates to observe its own isolation. From this arises that boredom and self dissatisfaction, the turmoil of a restless mind and gloomy and grudging endurance of our leisure, especially when we are ashamed to admit the reasons for it, and our sense of shame drives the agony inward, and our desires are trapped in narrow bounds without escape and stifle themselves. From this arise melancholy and mourning and 1,000 vacillations of a wavering mind. Bowed up by the birth of hope and sickened by the death of it, from this arises the state of mind of those who loathe their own leisure and complain that they have nothing to do, and the bitterest envy at the promotion of others. For unproductive idleness nurtures malice, and because they themselves could not prosper, they want everyone else to be ruined. Then from this dislike of others' success and despair of their own, their minds become enraged against fortune, complain about the times, retreat into obscurity, and brood over their own sufferings until they become sick and tired in themselves. For the human mind is naturally mobile and enjoys activity. Every chance of stimulation and distraction is welcome to it. Even more welcome to all those inferior characters who actually enjoy being worn out by busy activity. There are certain bodily sores which welcome the hands that will hurt them, and long to be touched, and a foul itch loves to be scratched. In the same way, I would say that those minds on which desires have broken out like a horrid source take delight in toil and aggravation. For some things delight our bodies even when they cause some pain, like turning over to change a side that is not yet tired and repeatedly shifting to keep cool. So Achilles in Homer lay now on his face, now on his back, trying to settle in different positions, and like an invalid could endure nothing for long but used his restlessness as a cure. Hence men travel far and wide, wandering along foreign shores, and making trial by land and sea of their restlessness, which always hates what is around it. Let's now go to Campania. Then when they get bored with luxury, let's visit uncultivated areas. Let's explore the woodlands of Bruttium and Lacania. And yet amid the wilds some delight is missing by which their pampered eyes can find relief from the tedious squalor of these unsightly regions. Let's go to Tarentum, with its celebrated harbour and mild winters, an area prosperous enough for a large population even in antiquity. Let's now make our way to the city. Too long have their ears missed the din of applause. Now they long to enjoy even the sight of human blood. They make one journey after another and change spectacle for spectacle. As Lucretius says, does each man ever flees himself, but to what end? If he does not escape himself, he pursues and dogs himself as his own most tedious companion. And so we must realize that our difficulty is not the fault of the places but ourselves. We are weak in enduring anything and cannot put up with toil or pleasure or ourselves or anything for long. This weakness has driven men to their deaths, because by frequently changing their aims, they kept falling back on the same things and had left themselves no room for novelty. They began to be sick of life, the world itself, and out of their enervating self-indulgence arose the feeling, how long must I face the same things? You want to know what remedy I can recommend against this boredom. The best course, as Athenodorus says, would be to busy oneself in the practical activity of political involvement and civic duties. For just as some people spend the day in sunbathing, exercise and the care of their bodies, and for athletes it is of the highest practical importance to spend most of their time cultivating the strength of their limbs, to which alone they have devoted themselves. So for you, who are training your mind for the contests of public life, by far the finest approach is regular practice. For when one intends to make himself useful to his fellow citizens and fellow men, he is at the same time getting practice and doing good if he throws himself heart and soul into the duty of looking after both the community and the individual. But, says Athenodorus, since mankind is so insanely ambitious and so many false accusers twist right into wrong, making honesty unsafe and bound to meet resistance rather than help, we should indeed retire from public and political life. Though a great mind has scope for free activity and even in private life, the energies of lions and other animals are restricted by cages, but not of men, whose finest achievements are seen in retirement.